Hi there. Welcome to Bible/Chat. Gus, hello.
John,
How
how's
are
it
you?
going? I'm doing well.
How was the East Coast? Was it
It's
nice?
beautiful.
We've missed you.
Yeah, right.
We've missed a few days of when we should be releasing Bible/Chats, and I blame you, to be honest.
Yes, there's only just me who does this.
There's two people to blame, you and me.
Yeah.
And I choose you. No, I'm just kidding.
And Kevin, where's Kevin?
Look, he's busy.
Is Kevin on the left coast?
No, yes. But he's been writing commentaries.
Oh,
He has
that's
excuses.
true.
I'm just kidding. Anyway.
Speaking of the left coast.
Yeah. Yes, very good.
Good. We just had a really good question.
Yeah.
The question says this, and I'll read a part of it, and then we can just talk a little bit more about it. But
Yeah.
the question has to do with it's an ethical question, right?
Mm-hmm.
How should Christians look at in vitro fertilization, like IVF?
IVF, yeah.
Is it? Would you look at? Should we look at that as wrong?
Yeah.
Fertilizing an egg outside of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Is it wrong? Is it right? Is there some practice that we should follow if someone's not able to conceive?
Yeah.
What do we do with that?
Yeah. So IVF obviously is a very modern ethical question. This wasn't even possible even 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
This was totally impossible. And now it's been made possible. And the longer it goes, the more cost accessible it is to more and more people. Obviously, IVF is a way to overcome infertility.
Yeah.
So there's a question in the hearts of people where they say, well, I'm infertile. I want to have children of my own. Okay, here's a technological way to do that. Now, what I would say, we can interact on this if you disagree. What I would say is that that's not necessarily wrong to use technology in various ways. So like a person could go on medication that could increase their fertility. That's also a very modern technique, a technological thing, and that would not be wrong either, right? We also use technology to prevent pregnancy in various ways. So there's nothing wrong with those things.
Now you're getting into another question.
We'll leave that section alone. But the point is using technology in various ways is not wrong. So we want to be very cautious of that. There's nothing right or wrong about the technology that allows for fertilization outside of the womb. That's not wrong. The problem with IVF, a couple problems with IVF. The first is that usually the way that IVF is done is that they will fertilize a large number of eggs with the hope that they harvest a large number and then they fertilize a large number with the hope that maybe one or two of them will be viable and that those viable eggs will then adhere to the mother's uterine wall and then will produce a child. The problem with doing that is actually found in the Word. So the Bible actually does address this issue.
Yes.
In Psalm 139, verse 13, it says, you formed my inward parts, my inner self. It says, you wove me together in my mother's womb. What David's doing there, and this is fascinating, he's ascribing his personhood to that, to literally that fertilized egg, that very first unwoven beginning.
Like the commingling of genetic material.
The commingling of genetic material. That's a good way to say that. That very first thing that happens there, he says, is him.
Yeah.
And what that tells us is that he's giving personhood to the fertilized egg, that very first beginning thing. Same thing is said in Psalm 51. He says, in sin, my mother conceived me.
Yeah.
So again, he's noting that, not that his mom was sinning when she conceived him. What he's saying is, in the moment of my conception, I was both person and I had a nature. I had a sin nature. So in the moment of conception, he sees personhood connected to just that moment of conception. And so what we would say is that every one of those fertilized eggs is actually a person.
Yeah.
A person
with a soul.
With a soul.
Yeah.
All
nature.
Of those things are happening. Exactly. All of that's happening in that moment of conception. And so technology is causing that conception to happen at a large level. And then what they do is they'll say, oh, we'll put them on ice. We'll freeze the eggs for a period of time. If the first ones work, then we don't need them anymore. We'll throw them away.
Yeah.
Well, that is actually morally reprehensible. Those are people. You can't throw them away.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, we're going to try this with a bunch of different ones, see what happens. Well, I mean, at that point, you're essentially taking people and using them in really unhelpful ways, really unrighteous ways, we would say. So what did we say about that? Well, if you're going to do IVF, there are doctors who do it in very, very conservative ways where they'll fertilize one egg. or 2 eggs and try to implant them, and that's
Yeah.
it, and not do more. Very expensive, much lower chance of success,
Yeah.
but there are ways to do it that are not
Yeah.
murder.
Yeah.
But we would say that fertilized egg thrown away, you're committing murder at that point,
Yeah.
and that's something that Christians should run from,
Yeah.
because it's unrighteous.
Yeah.
So, just to summarize all that, the technology itself is not evil. How the technology gets used, if it involves fertilization and then the abandonment of those fertilized eggs, is evil. That's sin against God. God has specifically labeled personhood at that moment of conception, and we would say a Christian shouldn't participate in that,
Yeah.
and a Christian should help other people to see that they should also not participate
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah. It's super interesting because I think that we, even as Christians, we're not thinking about that commingling of genetic material
Right.
as a person or someone with a soul
Right.
and a nature.
Yeah.
We are not trained that way. We're just thinking, well, we wouldn't say fetus, but we would say, well, it's a baby. And,
Yeah.
but it's very easy just to get away from that, actually from the biblical language, that is actually a person.
Yeah.
And that is someone with already a fallen nature, but it's a person that deserves to live.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
amazingly enough, we've forgotten that.
Yeah. It's funny. There was a secular comic recently who had a stand-up routine, and he said, okay, I mean, he's like obviously not pro-life. He doesn't have the same moral principles that we do. But he said, well, okay, I mean, I get it. They're trying to tell me this isn't a person, and I understand where they're coming from on that. But he said, like, if I went to my house and I mixed together flour, sugar, eggs, and milk, and I stirred them up and I put them in a pan and I put them in my oven, and before it was done cooking, you came to my house and you grabbed that out of the oven and you threw it in the trash, I wouldn't say, hey, you threw away my non-existent thing that doesn't have any meaning whatsoever. I would say, you threw away my cake.
Yes. Yeah.
And he said, that's exactly what that to me, that's the same thing. Like, you can say whatever you want, but that's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's like helpful. Like, he's a totally secular guy, but that's a guy saying, look, that thing will eventually be a person. Barring some other intervention, that will eventually be a person. If that's the case, it is a person. And it's pretty hard to redefine that. There is a secondary question, which is like, what do you do if maybe in the past you did do IVF, or I did IVF, it was or wasn't successful, or maybe you have frozen children somewhere. What do you how do you deal with those things? So maybe
Well, there's a ministry out there. I think it's called, I want to butcher it, something Snowflake.
Snowflakes.
It's Snowflakes, right?
Right,
it sounds bad.
No.
But so it's so I think that ministry, what it does, it allows you to adopt an embryo. And so that you can have it implanted and then have children. These are embryos that were going to be discarded, killed, and then they're waiting somewhere in some freezer, and you can use that. So what I would say, and what we would say is, obviously, if you have done that in the past, it's like anything else. Repent from it.
It's a sin.
It's a sin. It's not a mistake.
It's not a mistake, so don't lighten it.
Mistakes is living the lights on at home, right?
Exactly.
Those are mistakes. This is a sin, so just repent from it. And
God forgives.
And God forgives that, and pursue righteousness. And a way to also pursue righteousness, if you do have some frozen embryos around or children, then go get them.
Figure out what to do.
Figure out what to do with them. Either put them up for adoption, or do something with them that actually would reveal the character of God to an unbelieving world. I think it's so easy for us to just look at, as we said, even as believers, to not assign personhood to something that it seems so inconsequential.
Single cells.
Single cell, but actually it is. It is the image of God. Even that embryo is an image of God.
Totally. Yeah, that's so helpful. I think that's super good advice. Just to say, hey, deal with what you've done and go and then unwind whatever that is. And you have the ability to do that. You have freedom to do that. So go and do it and figure out what that looks like. And then if you need help on how to do that, talk to your pastor, right? Go talk to a pastor, talk to someone who's a spiritual mentor who can care for you and help you walk through the moral implications of those choices. But man, Do something, right?
Yeah,
Don't just stay there and say, well,
Yeah.
I made a mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
Super helpful.
All
Well,
right.
I hope that's helpful for you. If you have any questions on this or any other topic, you can always email us at info@faithbibleoc.org. Thanks so much.